Oh my word. I hope I don't have to sneeze right now. Oh, excuse me. Okay, we're going to come up in five, four, no, another 10 seconds so I can make sure I have that. That's clean from here. Thanks for the reminder. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. By the time you hear this, it will be day 41 of the government shutdown. This is the largest, the longest shutdown we've had in history. What is really going on here? Because indeed, one has to wonder what will be, what would be the issue that would get things moving, that would allow both sides, if you will, that would allow us to have the accommodation that could reopen the government. And I think that, what we need to do is step back and really understand what we're talking about when we look at the government. Our government, if it were classified as a business, and it actually is, it is the biggest business on earth. If you added up the 20 top companies, Amazon, Nvidia, all of them, if you added them all up, all of their assets and their gross products, they would approach maybe our government. Our government is why they are in business. In fact, they do business with our government, with our monies, because it's the biggest business on earth. So when you look at this in terms of, let's switch to corporate talk, corporate takeovers, and um, and boards of directors and things like that. I think we have to look at this a little bit with greater depth. And is this a hostile takeover? What's going on when people talk about fascism? Do you really know what fascism is? It's really a conflation of corporate and governmental power. And really, the corporate power is trumping the government power, usurping you. We need to talk about that. Who are the people who are sitting in the office with the president? What is going on? Is ICE or ICE on our streets, are they distractions for us? Are they softening us up to be obedient? Are we being goaded into having some kind of violent uprising when you deny people food and clothing and shelter and health care? You can get people very angry. And yet, one of the great things that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and his adherents taught us was that a non-violent revolution is the way to go. That's the way you can get things moving. Really, 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 really. That's how the people can get things moving. So let's talk about this with Keith McHenry, Food Not Bombs, one of the great activists of our time. And really, I think we have to claim the title of patriot, really, and and really reclaim, what it is to be humane. And I would say the same of Attorney Robert Patillo, of course, former head uh, of the Rainbow Push Office, the southeastern region in the United States, and he's done a lot of work on radio and television. You can catch him on so many different platforms, and of course, uh, communications director formerly for Congressman Jonathan Jackson, and so many people. I mean, they've been furloughed. I mean, who has heard of such? I mean, this is the government. There is no business going on right now. Well, no, but there is business. And maybe we are being governed without government. Think about it. And look at what's happening with the chaos in the country, the chaos with flights. Who wants to fly? Who needs to fly? Many people are afraid to fly, not because it's unsafe, but because you don't know if your plane is going to take off. We've got a lot that we need to talk about. So let me start with you, Keith McHenry, because you said something to me that was just really interesting, and I didn't want it to slip under the radar, slip unnoticed with people. You said, "Wait a minute, the government is not collapsing; it's being collapsed." And when you looked at Doge, something struck you as being interesting, if not downright odd. Keith McHenry.
Yeah, well, it seemed like what Doge was doing was the first step in essentially transferring the assets of the U.S. government to Elon Musk and Palantir and Oracle. And even though they already have like these massive CIA and defense contracts, they basically seem to be taking all the assets of the government and just transferring to themselves. And I think part of the idea is that they're systematically that they're not probably intending to reopen the government until they basically have collapsed the government, and then they're going to scoop up everything that they think is valuable and leave the rest of the people behind. And they may be there's like some hints of giving out like $2,000 a month or something, which may be the once there's a total economic collapse, which seems to be very likely any, I would say maybe at least by the first of the year, but maybe even soon, maybe a little bit later than that. Then what would happen is they would go, "Oh, it's too bad, everything failed." In fact, Secretary of Treasury was already talking about that today on the morning shows, and then they would just say, "Well, there's nothing we can do. We're going to give you biometric digital ID, which is your local driver's license now, your real ID." And then instead of it just being for federal buildings and for flight, it'll be for groceries and everything. And then you'll be able to access your programmable digital currency, and it may appear that it's just your bank account or it's an EBT card that finally comes back, but it'll be completely digitally controlled, because that's what those people have been talking about for years, and it looks like they're finally coming to that point. So I remember when the savings and loan crisis happened, that was one of the early steps. Well, you can go back to the Great Depression, but they just do this in this cycle where they pull the rug out from the American people, and then they institute a new thing. So after the last financial crisis in 2008, they were like, okay, we got Dodd-Frank, and now the banks can bank in, right? That's now legal. So they can use your deposits to make banks solvent. And that may be what happens is suddenly your money is no longer available to you. We've seen that in California with Bank of America, where many depositors couldn't get their money from Bank of America because of what was supposed to be fraud in the COVID fraud, because prisoners were somehow stealing money through Bank of America. So I was having to help homeless people with their Social Security check till they couldn't get it, just so they could buy simple things through that period. So it seems like this is all planned. And you can see right when Elon Musk was consolidating everything for the U.S. government, and then it all becomes part of Palantir, has all the data, and they're basically becoming totally upfront that the deep state is running the United States, and that they're going to just seize all of our assets, and that's what this financial collapse is about. And I've been watching federal employees saying, "Look at it, we're not even thinking the government will ever be reopened as it currently is." And people were talking about like after January 1st, like federal daycare centers and federal property will no longer be happening. Some people have been getting notices that's over. So
what do you mean? What do you mean by that?
well, apparently these federal workers had daycare centers where they were, to put their children when they were working, and then they received notice that they would no longer be available to these federal employees after January 1st. Now, I don't know how widespread that is, or if it's just because that's the other thing they're trying to. It's very uneven chaos. I think it's Operation Chaos. It might be called also, it's sort of like a strategy of tension on a global scale. I think a lot of these color revolutions that are happening, coordinating. I was at a protest against the color revolution, or the Gen Z revolution that's financed by U.S. NGOs and probably behind the scenes CIA is organizing. Although I haven't found the exact link to that yet, but they're attempting to cause destabilization in Mexico, just like they did in Nepal, and they're trying in Indonesia and the Philippines. So there seems like a global strategy to take down the economic system and replace it with a digital system, And I think they think now AI is so good that we can actually do this. They might have tried to do it before, but now they think they have enough data from AI that they can pull this off. And you look at like Vietnam, like thousands and thousands of depositors just lost all their money because they hadn't signed up for the biometric ID, facial recognition, and eye scans, and all that. And you see that starting to leak. Like Mexico's going to do the same thing in February. So it seems like, and they've written about it in the UN website over the years, the World Economic Forum, which now Larry Finks is the head of. These,
And
Trilateral Commission, all.
Larry Finks is who?
He's the head of BlackRock, which really, his thing was that he invented whatever, I forget the name, Aladdin, his computer system, which was used in the last financial crisis. And that's how Obama administration figured out how to handle that crisis. And Aladdin suggested they bail out the banks rather than the homeowners, which it would have been obvious. There's a great book, Homewrecker, and it shows like there was a fight at the beginning after the housing foreclosure crisis. So the most logical thing, I think many of us thought, well, you just bail out the homeowners. They're going to then pass on the money to the very banks that they, because that's the whole point. Then the banks would still win and the 5.5 million families would still have a house. But they decide, oh, we can't do that. We're just going to give them bypass the 5.5 million households and just give it right to the banks, which then created another financial, crisis for those families who could no longer, and many of them were African Americans who their entire wealth was in that home and it was just gone, and it was completely devastating. So this is the strategy I think they're doing now, and I think it's very intense that it's on such a mass scale, and it's like global, but it's particularly right now crashing the U.S. economy, and it doesn't make any sense. Why would you have all these federal workers that aren't buying stuff? That's like a lot of billions of dollars moved out of the economy intentionally. It's like food stamp people are not. People without food stamps aren't buying groceries. Does really Walmart not want people to buy groceries and lose all that money? What is it going on? And it can't. You would think that these large corporations that are losing so much income because of this would be up in arms, but they're not even on TV saying a word. It's like they're just ignoring it. It's quite frightening.
Robert Patillo, what's your take on where we are right now? Do you see an end in sight to this shutdown?
No, and part of the reason I don't think we're going to have an ending time soon is what a lot of people don't realize is this is just a vote on a continuing resolution to keep the government going, ostensibly at the previous spending levels. They would still have to come back in December and vote on all these exact same things again during the lame duck session. So essentially, even if let's say they came to an agreement tomorrow morning, and they either decide to get rid of the filibuster and reopen the government, or the Democratic senators decided to break ranks, vote on the clean CR. You still are going to have about a week for things to just spin back up, to get people back in town, to get the federal agencies going, to get checks up and running. By then, we have Veterans Day this week. By then, we're going headlong directly into Thanksgiving. So then the government's closed again for about a week for Thanksgiving. So then we get back for December, and we have literally 2 weeks before everyone switches into leaving for Christmas. So the idea of those things all taking place in sequence is kind of fanciful. So in reality, we're looking at a shutdown that's going to last at least through the end of the year, if not into the new year. And then on the second thing you have to think about is, what are the vested interests involved? Who exactly benefits from the government being closed, and who benefits from the government reopening? So if you're looking at who benefits from the government being closed, one of Donald Trump's number one things coming into office was to close down many of these federal programs, to defund these federal programs. That's what the Doge Project was. They've always wanted to get rid of food stamps and SNAP benefits for poor people. They don't care about them. This is a blunt force way to get rid of that all at once. they wanted to get rid of most of the federal workforce because they considered the federal workforce to be this kind of deep state full of liberals, etc. So yes, now you're able to get all those people out of work, and you're going to see maybe 10 to 20% of the federal workforce never return from this because people have to go get new jobs in the interim, and those new jobs they might find out are better than the ones they had in the government. The private sector pays more than the government, for example, and then that will create the vacuum where they can simply insert these MAGA loyalists. Because if you notice, they're not putting qualified people in these positions. They're putting young people in these positions. They're putting kids in their 20s and mid 20s, early 30s at the most as heads of departments, deeply entrenched into the federal bureaucracy, where they will be there for the rest of their lives, for the next 30 or 40 years, or is what they're hoping for. And then if you're looking at it from the Epstein perspective, Donald Trump has no interest in opening the government so we can vote on the release of the Epstein files right before the holidays. He doesn't want that to take place. So when you're looking at who is actually going to benefit from keeping the government closed, all the Republican policy agenda items are fulfilled by keeping the government closed. Democrats are the only ones who suffer. You're only going air traffic controllers. They've been wanting to get rid of them since Reagan, and having them all leave right now is only a benefit to them because they feel that those are more federal employees that are benefited by diversity, equity, inclusion. Because Reverend Jackson made them start hiring Black people about a decade ago, and they've still been mad about that. You know, when you're talking about getting people out, off of the government payroll, they've always wanted to do that. And now President Trump, most importantly, gets to govern as a king because there are no checks and balances. There's no one to impeach him right now. If he went out, as he said, on Fifth Avenue and shot somebody right now, there's literally no recourse for anything that he's doing right now. So if you think that the Trump is just sitting at home every day, crying, burning the midnight oil on how to reopen the government, he's down at Mar-a-Lago with the dancing girls and the teacups. You know, he's over in Malaysia doing his Trump dance. He's getting golden golf balls and crowns from Korea, etc. He is giving you no indication that he cares about reopening this government. So people need to figure out how to adapt around it, because there's nothing currently going on that should make you believe the government's reopening anytime soon.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, help me to why does that resonate with you, Keith McHenry?
Yeah, but God, I think they're using every lever of how the government is organized and society is organized to do this, because it is right. There, you know, if you were thinking that somehow the government was working the way we have thought it's been working our whole lives, none of this kind of thing wouldn't be happening. It's a perfect excuse to not open the government because you can't get people in there right away. They probably had this figured out that, okay, there's Veterans Day, then there's the Thanksgiving vacation, and then the holidays. So this will maybe keep there from being riots and at first, because there seems to be a logic to it, right? And they're using every aspect of the function of government to manipulate events, because their grand strategy is to essentially get rid of all these departments that they don't find profitable. Why would you seize the food stamp program and manage that unless there was a way you could make money on it? So if you're coming from the point of view of these basically the people that have populated both the administration and much of particularly the Republican Congress. So to them, the American people go, well, we're not going to get food stamps, until after the new year, because of just what Robert described. It makes total sense that American people will see it that way, not like it that way, but it might be a way of holding off massive resistance to what's going on until we recall Trump sending 500 soldiers to every state to train the National Guard and for riot control. And so why would there be riots? If there were, everybody's going to get food stamps and the WIC is going to reopen and all these things like that are going to happen, then there would not necessarily be any riots. Do they want riots? Is that part of what's going on? Putting ice on the street, raiding people's houses and so on? so that it becomes normalized that that the military gets deployed and that they crash the economy and that they know, okay, now we've got civil defense troops on the streets to defend like what the interests of the wealthy. That might be part of their strategy. And then the other thing is that they're starting to build like pretty large detention centers, and partially for undocumented people to be placed into them, but also we're now seeing that homeless people are being funneled into these programs like the navigation centers and so on that we see like outside of Salt Lake City in Utah. So it seems like that what Robert is outlining is so useful to the agenda that the Republicans and the Trump and have been saying they wanted for like since before Trump even was elected the first time, right? It's a perfect no Department of Education and then no funding, no food stamps. Oh, well, we'll just abandon that project. Now, what are they talking about? Having to change Social Security. So millions of Americans on Social Security that thought that they had like a insurance for the, through their old age, which doesn't even pay the bills at this point. That could be altered so that people are, I'm not even sure what their strategy with that is, but to just have less, access to funds or maybe get rid of Social Security altogether. Who knows? These people are monsters. They've been doing a genocide in Gaza that we're watching on TV, on our screens, that is horrific. And was that in part we allowed to see this genocide because they can go, oh, look what we did there. We have no morality. We're beyond the pale. We can do absolutely anything. Now they're introducing the drones that they've been using in Gaza to American police forces. So, it sounds like they've got a plan. Hopefully they have not taken into account the human spirit and the fact that because that's what I'm also seeing is this amazing outpouring of people starting new Food Not Bombs groups, donating food, trying to help out. So it may be that they just have not thought out exactly the fact that people aren't going to ultimately bend to all this dystopian strategy that they're trying to force on us.
Robert Patillo, as you respond to what you're hearing from Keith McHenry, Food Not Bombs, what is the significance of the Epstein files? We see, Representative-elect Grijalva, who is not being sworn in. I mean, I don't know if there's any precedent for this. She would be the 218th vote, and there is publicly, you have Thomas Massey, you have Marjorie Taylor Greene as Republicans who have come forward to say we need to release these files. We need to know what happened, not just with the sex trafficking, but with the blackmail, with the influence. And I get the sense, and you can help us to understand this, that they would have more company in Congress, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massey, if people were not quite frankly frightened of retaliation from other forces. What is the deal with the Epstein files, Robert Patillo?
Well, let's put it this way. Think about the British Empire. Think about the things the monarchs have done over the years. Think about human trafficking, slavery, the subjugation of the Indian subcontinent, massacres, brutality on an untold level. There's a reason that the villains in Star Wars have British accents. George Lucas talked about this because he talked about the fact that when he thought about the embodiment of pure evil, there was nothing in history more evil than the British Empire. The one thing they almost never do is strip you of your title as a British monarch, strip you of your rank as a British monarch. I mean, the things that have been done, and you still kept the title of prince or king, have been abhorrent for 1,000 years at this point in time. Going back to the Norman conquest in 1066, you can go from King Henry on forward, and they stripped Prince Andrew of his titles and his properties. and that he would just be, he had to go back to his original name, Mountbatten, because of what is in the Epstein files. Think about how much terrible stuff the British Empire has done. And whatever's in the Epstein files is so bad, they had to strip Prince Andrew of his titles and his nobility and his inheritance. That should give you an idea of what's contained in those files, and that should give you an idea of why exactly they're not coming to light. Todd Blanche, President Trump's former personal attorney, and now the assistant attorney general, met with Ghislaine Maxwell, and whatever Ghislaine Maxwell told him was so significant, he immediately moved her to a minimum security prison the next day in Texas, a prison that they had to get a waiver for because with the crimes she's been convicted of, she is ineligible of being in that prison. So when we're talking about what's potentially in those files, it's something to the extent that the revelation of it could indeed bring down the U.S., if not multiple governments worldwide. That the level of penetration that this has into the societal structure is such that it may be one of those things that that perhaps the global ecosystem is not prepared to be a part of. Because I do remind people, and this is a valid point that our Republican friends make, Biden could have released these files at any point in time. It's not new information. It's not as if it's something that we had no idea about. Jeffrey Epstein killed himself during Trump's first term. Trump could have released the files then if it was something that he was interested in. So this is something that cuts across party lines. It cuts across national lines and international boundaries as a transnational issue. And I think there was a report that Melinda Gates actually ended up divorcing Bill Gates because of his association with Jeffrey Epstein. So when we talk about the individuals involved and the power structures involved, it's unlikely we will ever see the full Epstein files or the unredacted Epstein files, because this is something that involves some of the richest people on earth, some of the most powerful people on earth, the most well-connected individuals on earth. And just the fact, as I said, of all the horrible excesses of the British Empire, the Epstein files is what gets you to take the titles away from Prince Andrew, to give you an idea of how significant it is. They treated Prince Andrew almost as bad as if he had married a black woman or something. That's the way that they're treating him because of these Epstein files.
Yeah, and the fact that they used the promise of the Epstein files and to get people to vote for Trump, that this was what's going to happen the second time, and people forgetting that he didn't do it the first time, and then it's almost like a psychological warfare, because now the MAGA supporters have lost. There's no peace that Trump promised in 24 hours in Ukraine. There's no Epstein files. There's no opening Fort Knox, and in part, I think it's to psychologically blow the minds of the people that were, voting to put him into power. And it's true, and also this whole blackmail stuff is to just show if the American people felt, because I suspect that all these videos that they took out of the Epstein's mansion in Manhattan, and whatever they didn't do in the Virgin Islands and Steve's there, and the fact that they never went to Ranch Zorro Ranch and to even investigate there, that means that there's all this video of people compromised, which they're used to manipulate events, and the only reason they haven't destroyed it yet is because they need to have it to keep everybody in line. It's just like the Diddy Combs case. These are all these, and there's probably even other blackmail financial arrangement things that we don't even know about that haven't come to light, that are maintaining power and as a way of making people go along and get along without rocking the boat. And I think, like what Robert's saying, if it got exposed, it would bring down many governments probably, and it certainly it could enrage people if these videos got out. If somebody intentionally leaks one or two, strategic videos, it's just be things would unravel. And then to have it connected Epstein and the Zionists in Israel, and this whole manipulation of that with the funding of Congress people and senators through AIPAC and promise to destroy careers if they don't go along with Israel first. It is psychotic. And my grandfather was in the Office of Strategic Services, which became the CIA, and he taught me. He died when I was 14. He was like, the elections we determine, the intelligence community manipulates events so they get who they want in office, and who doesn't get in office. And then he also admitted it. He was a Harvard law graduate, and he was very proud of the fact that he was in a satanic organization and kept saying there's no God, and so you would have to
Wait, well, you need to explain what that means.
Okay, well, he was. I don't know where he got recruited, but he either Phillips Exeter, where George Bush Sr. went, or Dartmouth College, or Harvard. But he was in a secret society, sort of like the Skull and Crossbones, but he never used the name. And and the thing that resonated. So when he died, his funeral was at a church because his second wife was in the Congregational Church, and I was so mad at the pastor for like saying he was a godly person and stuff, because he had told me over the course of my life that there was no God, and that it was and that there was only Satan. I mean, he was upfront about that. And that you think that, the skull and crossbones and all these things are some kind of hokey thing, but from his point of view, that was the root cause of why he could, for example, argue with Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara and General Curtis LeMay through the Vietnam War. And I watched him on the phone and yelling at them that they need to drop the atomic bomb on Hanoi because we had to send a message to the communists. He was so proud of firebombing Tokyo, and what Daniel Ellsberg says is the most deadly bombing campaign in world history, Operation Meeting House, that he directed from Burma. And he had 63 black and white photos that he took from the Bombay, or from a B-29 bombers, of the extent of the fire damage there. And he also talked a great deal about setting up a heroin distribution system to the United States during World War II, because of the unequal GI Bill, and fearing that the black community would rise up. So his strategy was, let's flood the black community with heroin. They'll be busy with that, and instead of actually organizing to try to get the GI Bill to be equal to whites. Because after all, these are black people that are dying in the same trenches, on the same ships, and the same planes as their friends, white friends. And there's this solidarity that is happening naturally by being in combat with people of other backgrounds. And they could not allow that to be, this unity to exist after World War II. So that was, that's one of the strategies. And so that's where I end up getting the idea that there is a nefarious strategy with what, like Robert is talking about using the timeline of Congress and so on to manipulate events, and that these people are soulless. You have Peter Thiel doing the Antichrist tour recently, and claiming that Greta.
What was that about? Could you explain?
Well, yeah, he was like talking about like he was actually asked if he thought humanity should exist in an interview recently, and he wasn't sure.
He could not give an answer, and he distanced the interviewer, right?
Right.
Said, "Wait a minute, are you telling? Please tell me that you believe that people should exist," and he could not give an answer. What did you? I mean, I know you heard about that, Robert. I certainly want you to respond to that too, but Keith McHenry, what did you think of that?
Yeah, well, I thought, well, he probably is what my grandfather was talking about. He talked about white man's burden. We were the ones that we would have to have the moral quandaries, but the people we killed would not. They just die, and so I think then when he does his one of the statements he makes publicly, because these Antichrist seminars in San Francisco are very expensive, and I really never saw any that much details about what was happening, except for his public statements outside. He was claiming that people like Greta Thunberg were the Antichrist, that people essentially that were standing up for humanity in Gaza were the Antichrist. And so it's some kind of very strange, twisted, almost like a satanic occult thing that these guys are pushing, and potentially also because of the eugenics aspect of this. That's like very linked into like what you were saying with the British. You know, they were very big on eugenics, and like Huxley's brother was
Aldous
ahead of,
Huxley.
yeah, he had wrote Brave New World, and his brother was ahead of the Eugenics Society. You have like all these connections like that, and I got the impression from my grandfather that yeah, these white, in his case, white Protestants, and he grew up Protestant, they were the rulers, and he was like a subset because really, of these rulers, he was one of the managers, the workers at the just below royalty in England to do the bidding of the banking industry, of the royalty, of the entire infrastructure that, like Robert was saying, has been going on for decades. He was or centuries, and that that's what he felt his job was to be aid in defending that political and economic system. And ultimately, I decided when I saw, my other grandfather lived with the Hopi and Old Arriby, and I would go to the snake dances there in first, second, and like fourth grade. And it was before Peabody Coal, and they flooded Lake Powell and all that. And when I saw what they did to desecrate this sacred land, I dedicated my life to doing whatever it took to nonviolently change the world, to confront any kind of economic and political system that would think that was okay. And so there's a mindset that they don't have, that life is not sacred, that the earth is not sacred. And that's why Elon Musk was like, oh, wow, we'll just go live on Mars, And then these fake fights between Elon Musk and the other tech bros are fake, because whatever Oracle is doing depends on what SpaceX is doing, which depends on what Palantir is doing. They're all in the same business. And that business, I believe, is basically confiscating the assets of the United States government and probably of other governments, like what they've done in Argentina, for example, recently. And they do not care. I mean, we are the collateral damage of this program that they believe is, that they're destined for some reason. This technical, they've said, well, technology really should be the government, not people, because technology has no feelings, and therefore it can make decisions, for instance, in your healthcare. AI decides whether you get it or not, or whatever it is, and they really seriously believe that. And since they're linked to massive military forces and surveillance and so on, I think they believe they can get away with it. And so it's up to us to prove them wrong.
Well, Robert, we had Gary Webb from the San Jose Mercury News who killed himself allegedly, with his non-dominant hand. Of course, he came to Operation Push then, and the Rainbow, and he was talking about the fact that the CIA had put crack in the Black community, and there have been these charges down through the years. And you see fentanyl dropped in the white community, quite frankly. Just the numbing out of people to keep them, I guess, from asking questions. We're not going to have an education department. You manage uneducated people, but you have to govern educated people. It's a different thing. So, Robert, what do you make of this? I mean, because Keith McHenry, you didn't know our dear friend, beloved Dwight McKee, and we're going to have his services, everybody, at the beginning of December. I will keep you apprised of that and look into streaming it for you. But this sounds, I wanted you all to meet Keith McHenry and Robert Patillo, because these things sound fantastical until you read, uh, until you appeal to get the documents that are sealed from public view released, and then you find out, oh, I'm not wearing a tinfoil hat. I'm actually, this is how this works. I mean, and Robert, what you, with all that you have been seeing, because you've been talking about, as we think of Peter Thiel, who does not believe that people should vote, and you've got the man who has been nominated to be the South African ambassador from the United States, who does not, who apparently feels that Black people in the United States should not vote. He was directly asked that question, I think, by Senator Murphy, and he would not answer the question. He would not affirm that Black Americans should have the right to vote. Help me to understand what is going on here, because you've talked about a convention of the states. I'm looking at not voting, Peter Thiel wondering, what really not affirming that human beings should even exist. Steve Bannon saying, look, no, Trump can come into a 2028 term, and we're working on that. So when you talk about a convention of the states, which we have not even thought about, quite frankly, I can't help but think that these people are thinking that way too, Robert Patillo.
Well, the good thing about the other side is they write everything down. They don't keep anything secret. I mean, they make you feel like it's a conspiracy theory, and then they'll write a 900-page document explaining it, have multiple websites, have a couple annual conventions, make YouTube videos, etc., and tell you exactly what it is. And then they'll even have the exact same people that were telling you there was a conspiracy, and then just put them in charge of the government, like Russ Vought right now. Russ Vought is literally the architect of Project 2025, and President Trump said, I'm putting him in charge of running the government while it's shut down. And that is who's currently running the government. So it's not as if these are things that people are pulling out of nowhere. These aren't tinfoil hat conspiracy theories. These aren't just like, oh, you crazy liberals types of situations. These are the things they have told us that they are doing. When we talk about the Convention of the States, and this is for people who don't know, Article 5 of the Constitution lays out how the Constitution can be amended. It can go through the normal amendment process that we've done 27 times, technically 18 times, the 17 amendments and then the 10 in the Bill of Rights all at one time to change the Constitution. But that's a very long, drawn-out, and difficult process. The other way to do it under Article 5 is simply if you get 34 states to petition Congress to have a constitutional convention, we have a constitutional convention. That's the only thing laid out in there. And in that constitutional convention, you have to get 38 states to vote in favor of any changes. So you can either amend the Constitution, or you can do a clean sheet rewrite of the entirety of the U.S. Constitution to create a new republic. How do we know we can do it? We did it before. After the revolution, we initially had the Articles of Confederation. Once that started according too many rights to the poor, and the rich figured out that they did not have a strong enough central government to put down local rebellions, that's when all the rich people came together and said, hey, let's rewrite this Constitution so that we can actually pool our money and resources to be able to control and subjugate the population. That's what the Articles of Confederation became the U.S. Constitution. The entire reason that we even became a nation and broke away from the British was, think about the story they tell you for why America became a country. Just think to yourself for a second whether or not it makes sense. You're part of the largest, most powerful, richest empire on earth. You're mad about tea or taxes or something, so you launch a war that you cannot win. There's no possibility of you winning. The British are actively winning the war. George Washington just simply keeps retreating. And then all of a sudden the British just agree to stop fighting and gives you the country. But they maintain economic control over the country, all the trading, and most Americans still consider themselves to be English subjects, including George Washington. The whole story doesn't make sense. What actually happened was after the 7 Years' War, the French and Indian War, as it was here in America, the British Empire had essentially gone bankrupt from fighting in the U.S., fighting in Canada, fighting in India. It was the first truly global world war which had taken place. The problem was that the British were treaty bound to not be able to expand westward across the Appalachians into areas where the French had previously existed. And the only way to get out of those treaties that they had with the natives was to kind of dissolve the colonial project and replace it with a nation idea concept that could actually break those treaties. So the whole concept was that they would just simply turn the American provinces into independently run nation that checks back in, and they could still economically control, and then they could expand westward. And that's immediately what America did. They expanded westward, put enough pressure on the French. Within a decade, they had to sell off their colonial assets in North America, giving us the Louisiana Purchase, and boom, America becomes a superpower. It had nothing to do with freedom and liberty and all those things. It was an economic situation, and the only way to break those treaties and get the resources of the rest of the nation was to dissolve the corporation that was the colonies and create the corporation that was the United States of America. So when we talk about what it would take and how America was formed in the first place, it was all the rich people got together and they made decisions that will put them in the best economic position. Where are we at right now? When you see Donald Trump at the inauguration with a line of Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, the guys from Amazon, we see the investments that Sam Altman-Fried and the Peter Thiel and the rest are making. When you notice that the entirety of the U.S. economy right now is deep into a recession, but 7 companies that pass money back and forth in the AI industry are keeping the economy afloat, it makes perfect sense that those same people would get behind ballot measures to ensure that they can push through a convention of the states by 2026. This is why you change all these voting laws. This is why you pick this particular time to gut the Voting Rights Act. This is why you have a Department of Justice that no longer intervenes or even investigates complaints of voting irregularities. This is why you push this entire theory around every election being stolen. We can't trust the process. So this is why, since Obama was elected, they've been investing in state and local offices. 1,044 state and local offices were lost by Democrats during the period of time that President Obama was in power. You put all these things together of all that money at the top, and you see what the clear plan is. The only way to achieve everything in Project 2025 is to rewrite the Constitution. Just full stop. There's no way that you can do it through normal boundaries. President Trump has already stretched the unitary executive theorem as far as is plausible to stretch it. He's accreted more power in his hands than any president, perhaps since Lincoln during the Civil War. And the only way that he can solidify that is by rewriting the Constitution to make those things permanent. Quite frankly, if President Trump is not able to do that, more than likely the day that he walks out of office, if the Democrats have a competent president and attorney general, the first thing they'll do is indict him before he can get out the building and probably have him in jail within 60 days. That's what would happen if he's not able to do this. So when you place all of these things together in a rational actor model, as they teach in political science class, it tells you one clear and simple thing. They are planning on rewriting this thing, and they are within 15 states of being able to do so. You just had an initiative in Montana. You just had an initiative in Connecticut just last year. There are currently 6 states where the Convention of the States has passed the one house of their legislature, not the other. So when we're talking about these special elections coming up, when we're talking about what happens in the midterms, if they're able to get these things through in 2026, then you're talking about a constitutional convention before 2028. And we're talking about a full, not conservative rewrite, but MAGA rewrite, clean sheet rewrite of the Constitution. And there's nothing that we will be able to do without it. And the fact that people aren't standing on the rooftop screaming this right now shows you how corrupted our political and our media system is.
Well, I mean, Keith, why did that resonate with you?
Yeah, because it's again what Robert's saying. It's another one of the strategies of totally taking control. I was going from Belgrade to Budapest, and the man in my car was an attorney for the United Nations, and he was telling me about the. First of all, he said the wall in the south was not to keep people out; that was to keep people in. And his family had escaped Nazi Germany. They were Catholics, and they thought they were in good stead with the Hitler regime. And it became clear that they were not, so they fled. and he was saying that he was supposed to be rewriting the Constitution of Kosovo. That's a war where both sides were armed and funded by the United States. And he said the U.S. delegation there was insane, that they were basically making it so what Robert's talking about would be the Constitution of Kosovo for the benefit of U.S. corporations and banking interests. So it's not far-fetched that they haven't already studied this and done this in other smaller venues like Kosovo, but that they are totally have this plan to do this with the United States. And it could happen very quickly, because imagine when you're in part of the Operation Chaos or strategy of tension, is to have everybody freaking out about just trying to survive, and the madness of what is going on with ICE troops on the streets and so on. And then on the back, behind the scenes, because we're not hearing about it in the media now, they just pull this out, they pass it. People are not paying attention, because that probably is one of the strategies. And then lo and behold, and people will, like, when they hear they're going to rewrite the Constitution, they go, "Oh yeah, this is great. This hasn't been working, blah, blah, blah." And then suddenly the Constitution is everything gets privatized. You don't really need elections, because now you have AI algorithms that can determine really what's best for everybody. And there'll be whatever this bizarre dystopian system that they're imagining and building. Then they'll say, yeah, it's the constitutional right to extract humans in any manner and, turn them back into slavery. That's in the Constitution, of course. So it resonates as a perfectly, it's just, there's so many angles of what's happening now that you could look at any one of these things and see how they're all integrated and put together. And this tinfoil hat idea, it's right in front of your face. Like Robert's saying, they publish all their papers. They tell you what they're going to do. These freedom cities, that they're trying to build. There's a bunch of billionaires are building a freedom city outside of the Bay Area now. And
what is a freedom city? Can you explain that to people?
Well, in this case, it's run by a corporation. They don't. You don't have the mayor is appointed by whoever the corporate executive is that owns it, and everything is hooked up to like a smart city basically. But what's different about that and a smart city? So the infrastructure is the same as the smart cities, where they use all kinds of surveillance, and they know how much electricity is being used by every household, and they know how much water is happening, and they know how many cars are going. They're putting these flock cameras everywhere that are to monitor everybody, but also to determine patterns of life within the communities that we already have. Well, they just have that in a big city that they own. And sort of like the way Disney World was originally, where it was they have these gated communities connected to Disney World, but Disney ran them and owned them, and you had no say within your community. This will just be a global version, or U.S. wide version of like a Disney, corporate controlled community, and then you've got the consolidation of the media. Have Larry Ellison and his son basically controlling the majority of the media, and now having bragging about how we're going to have algorithms on TikTok and other social media where our message is really all that gets out. Because that's the other thing that to get the word out about organizing for something. Right now, we're in those last times where we can be on a program like this possibly. And then they'll oh, well, that violates the new Constitution, because only our media outlets are allowed to say whatever it is, And you see that with the suppression of free speech on things like, on Gaza, so they are, and what they're doing, say, for instance, in England, where they arrest thousands and thousands of people for holding a sign that says that they support Palestinian action and they're against the genocide. I mean, and they're going into people's houses in England and arresting them for posting stuff against, the genocide on social media, or another, saying other negative things that the government doesn't like. You don't even not even limited to that. Pretty frightening.
Well, what and I want to tell everyone, we're going to continue on and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. We've been talking with Keith McHenry and Robert Patillo. Going to continue this discussion for just a little while longer, but I want you all to that's why you have to come to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. And have you not noticed all of the static we have when we're having this conversation? Yeah. Hey, my goodness. But I have some questions for you. And of course, welcome back to AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, the Santita Jackson Show. Keith McHenry, Food, Not Bombs. Robert Patillo, brilliant, really thought leader, former head of the Southeastern office of the Rainbow Push Coalition, comms director for Congressman Jonathan Jackson, a veteran of the Hill and of politics for the past 30 years. Can't believe that you've been out of college for a few minutes, but you have, but that's all right. And he's also a brilliant chef. And there we go. But do you think, as we're asking the question, everybody, I'm seeing across my crawl that maybe we are close to a Senate deal to end this this government shutdown. But Robert Patillo, you said don't get too excited because we have a continuing resolution. Most of us are not. I worked on the Hill. I know what a continuing resolution is, but most of us don't even know what all of that is. And then, of course, I have questions for you about Mamdani and just as you were saying, Keith McHenry, I'm like you. I believe in the vitality of the American people and of the human spirit. I mean, there's something else that's going on too, something that my mother and father called the God factor. You don't know, man plans, God laughs. There's that. But let's start with the possibility that that this could be over. If they end this shutdown now, is it over, Robert Patillo?
Well, it's not over because the underlying issues still exist. Underlying issue one, Republicans have wanted to get rid of Obamacare since the minute that it was created. And if you can't simply repeal it because John McCain put a thumbs down, and because Republicans don't want to take an up or down vote that can be used against them in the midterms, you do exactly what they're doing now with the continuing resolution, which is you just starve it to death. And you just simply allow it to expire by operation of law, because if the subsidies go away and Obamacare becomes completely unaffordable, then that means no one's going to use it. So the entire system breaks down. This is what Obama was saying back 15 years ago almost, when they were talking about the need for a government option that we never ended up getting. From the beginning, Obamacare was never going to fulfill its dreams because they would never allow, and this is Democrats at the time, would never allow a full universal health care system to go into place. The insurance companies still had too much money. But
is that what the government option was?
Yeah, that was the government option. The government option wasn't going to be universal health care. The government option was going to be that individuals had the option to buy a government plan instead of everything just simply subsidizing private industry. So because we ended up with a system to just subsidize private industry never had an actual economic reason to lower premiums. So you have to have these subsidies in place just to make the system work. So the only way to actually long-term fix the issue of subsidies is either A, make the subsidies permanent, which is a backdoor way of having a government system around it, or B, to amend Obamacare to create a government option, which would actually make the math, as the young people say, make the math. So that's not going to be fixed in the next month. I'm just going to put that out there and say. And so even if you're able to cobble together a compromise, now Schumer put out the proposal to simply have a 1-year extension on the Obamacare subsidies. That's just kicking the can down the road to a place where we're simply saying that, well, we'll get through the midterm elections and then everyone will be kicked off of their health care essentially. So long term, you're going to need an actual solution to some of these problems. And even in the short term, let's say you get a continuing resolution in place right now that will keep the government open through January. Well, now we have time to go home, We may or may not have a holiday season because between tariffs, shutdowns, air traffic controllers, and the price of goods, the holiday season is so bad that President Trump had to lie about things being cheaper for Thanksgiving. So when you have that in place, now you're looking at a situation where we're just going to come right back and do this exact same thing either in December or January. So yes, I very much would like the government to reopen and to return to work and to be able to get some of these things done. But it's simply looking that we're moving towards a place of eternal gridlock. And guess what? If you can say that the system is completely broken, that is ground completely to a halt, and this is what they're saying in France right now. And I remind people that the US and the French system were corollary systems. We had revolutions around the same time. We both were led by Enlightenment thinkers. Jefferson thinking himself to be in league with Hobbes and Locke and Rousseau, etc. We very much had similar systems. France is on their fifth republic right now, and there are calls for them to go to a sixth republic because we've had so many prime ministers over the course of the last 3 or 4 years in France. We've had so much turmoil. People are saying that France is fundamentally ungovernable and they need to start over from scratch and write out a new constitution and have a sixth republic. That's the conversation they're having right now, that Macron does not want to take place because he believes that Marie Le Pen, the National Rally, the far right-wing group, their version of the MAGA movement in France is the National Rally. He's worried that they currently have consolidated so much power. If you do a constitutional rewrite, that Macron, even though he's very much a right-winger, but just a traditional right-winger, he's afraid that you would turn France essentially into a fascist dictatorship, much in the way that Giorgia Meloni is attempting to do in Italy right now, and putting them on the team with Viktor Orban and Lukashenko and Erdogan, some of the despots of Europe who are trying to reestablish the previous colonial system. But if you show America that our system is broken, we're having government shutdown after government shutdown, there's no ability to predict the future, there's no stability, the dollar loses its reserve currency status, which we're moving in that direction rapidly, then you'll see the predicate set for them to come back and say, and this is why we have to have this convention of the states, this is why you have to give Trump the opportunity to have the constitution that he wants, this is why within the next 2 election cycles, we need to get together and rewrite this Constitution. The people rewriting it are going to be Stephen Miller, Steve Bannon, the Heritage Foundation, and the MAGA movement, their intellectual heavyweights. And very much Democrats will be in a position where they will have little to no say in what goes into this new Constitution. And the new founding fathers of America will be Donald Trump, Don Jr., and all the rest of that cavalcade, that they will be the ones controlling what the future of the nation is. And it's not that there's something we'll be able to go back in a few years and change. It will more than likely take at least a century to get enough state houses to flip back the other direction. We're talking about flipping upwards of 20 plus state houses in the other direction in order for Democrats to have the ability to re-amend or to call a new convention of the states if they're able to do this. This is a once in a not once in a lifetime, once in a generation. This is a once in a century opportunity that we're looking at. And I don't think they're going to let this opportunity pass them by.
Well, let me ask you both this, because correctional officer for the lockdown wants to pose this question to you, Robert Patillo, but also to you, Keith McHenry. Many people are very excited about the Mamdani win in New York, and he poses the question to you, but I certainly want you to jump in on this too, Keith McHenry. He says, Robert Patillo, what's your take on New York's mayor-elect? Will New Yorkers give him a longer trial period than Chicagoans have given Mayor Brandon Johnson, who is also a progressive, everyone? And I have to, everyone, we almost had a young man who could have won in Minneapolis, State Senator Omar Fateh, but there was a complete blackout, if you will, no pun intended, on a black man in Minneapolis. He won the caucus. That is how they have a mayoral nominee. And then the party took the nomination from him. And apparently the mayor also exploited tensions that exist between Black Americans who did not immigrate from the Caribbean and from the diaspora. So there's that. Even though he's Somali American, he is someone who identifies as a black man. His father came over here as a student in the 60s. And he said, son, when I'm pulled over by the police officers, they don't see someone from Somalia. They see a black man. He said, so I was raised that way. And that was it. So, what do you make of Mamdani? I mean, he is, the people went past the party and they went toward a proposition. What do you make of him, Robert Patillo?
Well, I think we've seen this growing tide grow for over a decade on the political left, and you talked about this actually years before other people. When you said that the Bernie Sanders voters who were screwed over during their primary, never given an actual opportunity to vote for him. When the Democratic Party decided that Hillary Clinton was just going to be the nominee and everyone else is going to be an annoyance, those people then just reintegrate back into the party. Those young, angry 20-something-year-old, disaffected Midwestern white men at the time, they became Trumpers. Those people who were completely socially liberal at that time, because they couldn't imagine themselves supporting Mitt Romney or Jeb Bush or some of these establishment Republicans. We have Trump coming in with Joe Rogan and Kid Rock waving an American flag with plastic surgery and boob jobs and long blonde hair, and you can do what you want. You can grab them by who knows what, and we're going to change things so you'll be back in charge. You'll be okay. Those Bernie bros, as they were called at the time, they became the manosphere. There's a direct line between those two, and because Democrats felt that at that time that you could ignore those groups, you didn't need to talk to those groups, you didn't need to take any of their concerns seriously. They were just misogynistic and incels and those things. Those became the basis of this current MAGA movement. So when you're looking at what's going on with Mamdani, it's been growing over the course, quite frankly, in the ashes of the Obama years, of this growing populist left of center movement is what's very significant social change. Obama was very much the American establishment's last gasp. We tried it one last time to do it the way y'all told us to do it. We have the perfect candidate with the perfect family, with the perfect wife and the perfect kid, who's a political moderate, who's willing to work on both sides of the aisle, who's bipartisan in his very nature, who's post-racial, who didn't talk so much about discrimination and talked about a route going forward. And they literally destroyed the man. They called him everything except a child of God. They treated him like he was a literal Marxist, socialist, Islamic terrorist in the White House. That's how you treated the best of us. So now you're going to get the rest of us. And so Mamdani very much is empowered to run as an unabashed progressive. He has the cachet to simply say, we're going to try the big things that they were afraid to try before. You can give me whatever label you feel like giving me. We're still going to try the things that we have never tried before in politics. And that's why I think the establishment, both Schumer, who wouldn't endorse Mamdani, or even Jeffries, who waited till the last possible minute to do so, they're going to have to start realizing, and we're starting to see with some of these retirements, that the sands have shifted under their feet. That the people are no longer interested in the same old story and the same old voices, and they're ready to fight back against not just their own party, but the establishment itself. That the fact that we've had so many politicians for so many years who simply had to say, I support Israel no matter what they do, when they do, where they do, how they do. That's now been broken. I don't think you can ever put that back in you can put the genie back in the bottle. People are openly questioning the activities of the Netanyahu regime, and President Trump has outlawed on college campuses that you're no longer allowed to talk badly about Israel on a college campus. If a college allows a pro-Palestinian protest to take place, the Trump administration will both sue them and remove their federal funding. And people are just in our American ethos, we are pushing back against that. We don't like being told what to do. We don't like you coming in saying that you're going to be reestablishing free speech and then doing more to destroy it than anyone in history. So I'm hoping that we see more candidates like this nationwide. Just in Georgia, we just had a 22-year-old be elected Mayor Stockbridge. We had a 24-year-old come within 83 votes of being elected the mayor of Marietta, Georgia. We're seeing young Gen Zs and even close to Gen Alphas getting involved in this process and simply saying, we will not wait our turn. We are not going to keep doing business as usual. We are no longer interested. And well, we're going to have a bipartisan agreement by which we will send a very strongly worded letter to the Department of Justice to ask them to come in for a hearing. And at that hearing, we will ask pointed questions and then generate a report. And then that report will be then sent. No, we're about to do something right now. And I think this right now generation who survived lockdown, who survived COVID, who are coming into a brave new world where now Trump is talking about doing a 50-year mortgage because you're never going to get a house, where AI is replacing their jobs. These are the Gen Z revolutions we're seeing around the world, and they're coming right here to America. And we have to take that and harness it into a non-violent revolution, where it's a political revolution, where we're radically changing the system. Because as we see on the Republican side of the aisle, there was a point in time when Republicans were the next oldest, whitest person in the building is the nominee. So Reagan had to wait 50 years, and then he was the nominee. Nixon had to wait 40 years, and he was the nominee. Gerald Ford had to wait around for decades, and he was the nominee. They changed that with Trump, and I think that's changing right now. And I think Mondani is very much the canary in the coal mine for that.
What do you think, Keith McKinnon?
Well, the big message there is that people are voting this direction now, and they're and that somebody like them can get elected mayor of New York City. Now, the thing is, because of the way the political structure is organized and everything, it's going to require massive grassroots defense of the ideas that he brought to the table. So it's not enough to be elected and then be in office. There needs to be an actual mass movement of supporters who are willing to take nonviolent direct action if necessary to essentially enforce the ideas that he proposed in his race. So the other thing is that what kind of skullduggery could happen behind the scenes? Because you're up against one of the largest intelligence operations in the world. So you need to step outside of the system in a certain sense and build like a people power that can't be so easily co-opted by the intelligence community and by money. So the good thing is that people are like, oh, we're not falling for the old story of anti-Semitism and you look at the election, so many Jewish New Yorkers voted for him, even though there was millions of dollars going, oh, he's like anti-Semitic and blah, blah, blah. He's the communist, blah, blah, blah. The people still said, we ignore what the status quo is saying, and we're going to vote for him anyway. And so that is a really good sign. Now, the thing is, how do you, we saw with Bernie, I was very active in supporting Bernie the first time. And then when it became Hillary, like open slave markets in Libya, Hillary, it was like deflated that kind of movement. So how do we keep like what, and I was like going, well, they've got like, he has Our Revolution email account, right? He's got all those of us that voted and worked door to door for Bernie. He could be mobilizing that to build a base to support, and defend people like the young people that have just come into office. So, it will be great if they are able to resist all the types of pressures and covert operations against them, and to continue really come with a program of like a rent freeze. I mean, fortunately, there's been even under past Democratic mayors in New York City's rent freezes and so on. So it's not out of the question that kind of a thing can happen. And it turns, because of the way the New York political system is, that's an attainable, the first attainable thing that he can do. But again, it's going to be, there'll be fear that he's going to end up being like a Bernie Sanders or an AOC, and we have to hold this, feet to the fire and make sure that does not happen. And it's going to require a mass movement in New York residents to defend his promises, not just himself, or the small number of people around him. It really has to be a citywide effort by people that supported him, which he calls out and brings to the streets, or brings to the city hall, or brings to whatever the mechanisms are that are needed to defend the promises that he made running for mayor.
Is that going to require Americans becoming even more proactive? Because, oftentimes we think that voting is the end of the process, and it's the end of the beginning, not the beginning of the end.
Yeah, that's, I think, where we have really fallen down, is that we've depended on vote for the person who is saying the stuff that we agree with, and then just go back to our lives. But the thing is that now we're in a critical time because of the economic and political crisis. I think a lot of people that normally would be busy watching football or going to the mall are now in a situation that, no, we have to do what, I've got young people have been approaching me about like general strikes and occupations, and they're really trying to write their own white papers, so to speak. And the thing is, a lot of that has been focused on kind of disrupting the political system as it is, but they're not coming up with what is going to replace it. How is this going to move forward? What will the political train be? And the issue is, how do you work against like this massive industrial, financial, intelligence linked efforts that will be pushing back on any kind of transformative purpose? And what do you replace if you do build this huge momentum for these ideas? How do you defend it? How do you not have it be undermined? And how do you? What is the actual concept that will be replacing the matrix that has been in power? It's very, very challenging, and I'm not seeing a lot of white papers or writing about that. And that's, once you get like good people in office, how do you maintain those good people? And what is the program that's going to be counter to like this corporate power and this whole like system that we have right now?
Well, Robert, why don't you describe to people what a general strike is? And who do you think, you just brought that up, Keith McHenry, who might, if people decided to have a general strike, because you kind of hear that here and there, what is it, and who do you think would push it? Would it work? Robert?
Well, this is the thing. I think that the wealthy have already started thinking about these things. Because if you notice, every major titan, all of the big seven, as it would be, are working on humanoid robots right now. You have Optimus that Elon Musk is working on. You have Boston Dynamics, who have a new humanoid robot that's supposed to take over office work and to take over factory work, etc. So the general strike is this idea of a people strike, saying that we're going to grind the means of production to a halt in order to force social change taking place. This depends on a few things. One, you have to have the social apparatus in place that that we're able to fund a general strike, because at the end of the day, people are still going to need to eat. People are still going to need to have utilities. In order to keep the strike going, you have to have the infrastructure behind the strike where communities are supporting each other. Think very much about the Montgomery bus boycott on the micro level. That the only way that worked was because thousands of people were able to carpool for almost 2 years, because people were providing food and venues to organize. So if you are talking about doing that on a national level, then we're talking about the exact same money special interest who will be damaged by it, having to put money behind that to take place. So the general strike would absolutely be effective right now. But the question is, how would it be organized, and how do you keep them from breaking the strike? What we're seeing right now in the government is essentially a strike. taking place. And the president is doing the exact same strike busting tactics that we see the billionaire class always do, which is saying, okay, you don't want to work, we'll starve the poor people. Oh, you guys don't want to show up and do what I said? We'll starve the poor people and nobody can travel. Oh, you still don't want to do it? We're going to starve the poor people, nobody can travel, and we'll get rid of your health care. Do you want to keep playing hard with it? And we have to have the gumption as a society to be able to take that on and to be willing to fight back given the opportunity.
Yeah, see, that's the thing is you have mass layoffs right now already. You do have a transformation into an AI robotic future. I mean, I have family members that have recently lost their jobs to AI. So how will you have like economic impact unless and you have to have like we're already trying to deal with providing food for millions of Americans who don't have SNAP. How are we going to do that for like 5 years of people like out not working in those 5 years? That will the people in power need workers, right? It's maybe 20 years ago, a sustained general strike with an actual program that comes out of it, your demands, like, okay, this is what's going to happen while we're crippling your ability to profit, and you're going to cry uncle, and then you're going to do like universal health care. You're going to have all these things that, like for Bernie was talking about, would that be implemented? So I think we are in a situation where that's sadly kind of unrealistic at this point. And but I do enjoy the optimism of young people thinking outside the box in that regard. But yeah, it would be I think unfortunately that is sadly unrealistic. In my Substack, I write a bit about. I have one of my latest things is the joys of anti-fascism. Community is the cure, and it could potentially be that really the solution is local organizing and community doing things together to make sure we have local culture and food and water and clothing and things, because the actual effort to change the federal government or even state governments in some kind of fundamental way at this point may not be possible. It may be that basically if you were able to threaten the government and the Trump administration and the corporate backers with a general strike, then that would be just one more way to rewrite the U.S. Constitution, right? So it could actually backfire on people that are seeking that way, because they go, oh, okay, we'll have a new constitution, but we don't have control of these state houses, and we wouldn't have control of how to rewrite the Constitution in a way that would benefit the American people. So it's a tricky situation now, and I'm not seeing anybody with an after story if you did successfully challenge people in power now through things like general strikes and boycotts and so on.
Well, with the advent of AI, one has to wonder how that would work. I mean, Robert Patillo, do you see? No one's talking about the possibility, at least not on the progressive side or the center left and left side of the dial, about that possibility. It seems that when I'm listening to Steve Bannon and when I look at the actions of his allies on that side of the aisle, they're getting ready for that. I mean,
They're not just getting ready for it. They've planned for it. It was baked into the entirety of this conversation. President Trump would not have won re-election without making the promises to the technocrats that we will be transitioning from a democratic system to a digital technocracy. This being a system where, as opposed to the people making the determinations, you would essentially have all major.
Well, wait a minute. First, what is a digital technocracy? Explain that.
Oh, okay. So taking the concept of a technocrat being somebody who is an expert in a field and who is unbiased by political machinations. He's not subject to some of the emotional whims. It's just a technocrat. You know what you want your accountant to be. You don't want your accountant to have a bunch of sympathy and to do a bunch of bleeding heart stuff. You want to know what are the numbers and what do I need to get the numbers where I want them to be. That's your technocrat. So when you move into a digital technocracy, you're essentially saying that you're allowing the digital assets to be the technocrats for your society. So the determinations are not being made by government bureaucrats, who will be the other side of it, but will be made based upon what the algorithm or the computer says is the best possible outcome. So now that we're seeing Grok AI being integrated into nearly every government system as a part of the agreement that Elon made with President Trump, because we saw that Doge essentially had free reign for about 2 months over every piece of data of the American government, and were able to feed those into their large language models in their pursuit of autonomous general intelligence, and then moving towards autonomous super intelligence in the next 3 to 5 years. The idea will simply be that all these hard decisions, instead of being made by elected officials who clearly have no interest in cutting the deficit and cutting the debt because they have to worry about re-elections, because they can't make decisions that are hard. The bureaucrats are never going to vote to cut their own pay. They're never going to vote to give themselves term limits. They're never going to vote on anything that's controversial or this long view, because they have to think election cycle by election cycle. If you turn this all over to a automatic super intelligence that digitally can make the most technocratically correct determination and can work these things out mathematically, you cut the human out of the loop, and in theory, you get the best outcome. The problem with that is, as we've seen in each and every single futuristic horror movie, whether it's Terminator or The Matrix, the computer has no empathy. It has no heart. So if it says, well, on this axiomatic table, if we allow the oldest people in the country to just die without health care, we'll save billions of dollars per year, because end-of-life care is the most expensive part of the healthcare system. Well, on a technocratic level, that's correct. But are we really willing to simply say we're going to let the oldest people in our society die and without care? That's what happens when you enter into this digital technocracy, and that's very much where we're going. Most of the president's executive orders that came out this term were written by AI. You can run it through an AI filter and see that it comes out. The Doge cuts were done by AI. When they were going through determining which employees will be fired and which ones will be kept, they fed into the algorithm, it made the cuts. And that's why we had to go back later and bring some of these people back, because apparently the AI wasn't where it's supposed to be at. But their entire plan is to have our system, instead of being run by debate, by compromise, by conversation, as our founders intended to be, that it will be run by these massive data farms that are being built around the country. Do you really think they're just building these multi-billion-dollar data farms and data centers around the country just so you can make videos of Dr. King dancing and playing basketball? Do you really think that's what they're doing this for? This is the largest gamble in human history. This is the entirety of our future. We are racing to say that America has to get to autonomous super intelligence before China, before Europe does. And whoever gets there first essentially will be able to launch information warfare and control the battlefield of the 21st, the latter part of the 21st century. So these are the people who are now making the decisions in our government. And that's why it was so important for them, even if they don't agree with President Trump on a dang thing, because I don't think Mark Zuckerberg and President Trump have a lot in common. What they do agree on is that the rich people have to be able to protect their money and protect their control. And if we give them access to super intelligence before anyone else does, they know that them and their ilk will be able to propagate the economic and social control going forward.
Yeah, exactly right. Couldn't be more clear. That's where we're at. That's what the digital biometric digital ID that's sweeping the world right now is to facilitate that. That's what all these Starlink and satellites and that they're putting up. They got a plan, and they told us that this is the plan. And technocracy has been a guiding light for these people for over 100 years, and now they've finally gotten to this point where they think they've got it. They've got enough learning in their system And why we spend, people are complaining about their electric bills going up. Part of it is because they need more power to build all these AI data centers. And they need more. They're using water, massive water to cool them, and they're proposing dozens of underground nuclear power stations to power it. And the very first press conference on the day after Trump's election, he announces a Stargate and a $500 billion investment. That's just a tip of the iceberg of what they're talking about. And the only one hope is that these these companies crash, because Michael Burry like shorting them on the Big Short in their stocks. Maybe they will go under, and that will slow this plan down. But I got a suspicion they've got another plan behind that one, and maybe that's part of the plan, right? We don't know.
Well, do you think is that why you were so alarmed with the assisted suicide plan in the law in Canada, and you warned that it was going to move to the United States?
Yeah, because they will figure out within this system, they go, these people are useless eaters. The language that was used to justify the genocide in Palestine will be the language that'll be used justify algorithmic death in the United States of useless eaters. And at first it'll like be already there's all these stories about where did the homeless go? What happened to homeless people that disappeared in our communities? Were they just like eliminated? Did they move on to another city, or were they put in one of these navigation centers, or what exactly is going on? And if you have mathematical algorithms that are determining, you already have that. Look at the struggle. People complain that doctors and so on are going, well, the algorithm told me I couldn't provide them with that medication or that surgery. And now you have AI doing surgeries, so it wouldn't be far-fetched over that, sort of like the turning up the pot of water, but the frog doesn't jump out. We're kind of in that situation, that metaphor, where they're like a little bit more, you can't use things. The money's becoming more and more digital. Maybe there's universal basic income that then can be turned off and on at will, or geofencing. So like, you want to go protest at Washington, D.C., but your digital currency doesn't work outside of your town. There can be these kinds of things. It could be very, and I'm sure they've thought this out. They've done, Rand Corporation and Heritage Foundation, and these think tanks have a lot of money to brainstorm. They do tabletop exercises, like when they after 9/11 they did the Dark Winter, where they wondered what would happen if there was an anthrax attack against prominent people, and then not long after that there was an anthrax attack against prominent people. So it's, these people have thought these things out, and we are just the thing is going to be the human spirit. Can we somehow maintain our humanity in the face of this onslaught? And thankfully, I think people will. I think they will. But how we survive it, and what we do to negotiate our lives under these circumstances, is going to be quite challenging. But I do have faith that people won't, that they will rise to the occasion.
Well, let me ask you this, because now it's been floating. Robert, you're a creature of Capitol Hill. They're saying that President Trump is floating a plan to give the healthcare subsidies directly to the people. What would that look like? And is that a win for people or not?
Well, a couple things. One, when we're talking about that, that's literally a government option. So that's why we know he's never actually going to do it. And I hate that people are so easily kind of tricked by things. Earlier, he announced that he was going to give everybody a $2,000 tariff dividend. What he's essentially saying is, hey, all that money you've been spending on tariffs all year, we're going to give some of it back to you. but we're still going to like net out of us making more money off it. But because you give it to people in one lump sum, they're going to think that, oh my God, Trump gave me a $2,000 check. Like, no, you've been paying that every time you bought a pair of leggings from Shein, or when you bought something off Alibaba, or then you got imported on Amazon. I love myself some Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee. It's one of the most delicious coffees on earth. And we got at our wedding in Jamaica, 10 plus years ago, and I've ordered it once a year ever since, this little treat. And it's about $25 a bag usually. And I thought, oh my God, I won't be able to afford this. I looked on Amazon yesterday, it's $115 it has that same bag. Because that's what the tariffs are doing. That's what the tariffs are doing right now. You can look it up right now. Go to Amazon and look up Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee. It's about $107, $120 for a bag of coffee just for the beans. So when you put this on people, and then you say, "Hey, I'm going to give you 2,000 of it back as dividends," people actually think they're getting something positive at it. Similarly, if you give the Obamacare subsidies directly to the individual, you're not actually addressing the issue of universal coverage, and you're not addressing the issue of cost. So all that's going to happen is that $50 aspirin that you got in the emergency room now will be $100 aspirin that you got in the emergency room, and the companies will still get all the same money. It's just a long way around the bar.
Are the ones who are winning. They're the ones.
Of course. Yes, the rich people are going to keep winning. You put a billionaire in the White House and you wonder why he does everything for billionaires. I don't know how he convinced all those economically distressed voters that he cared about them. He dressed up and he got into a garbage truck. He dressed up and pretended he worked at McDonald's, and people believed it. And at this point in time, a lot of people are probably saying maybe we should rewrite this Constitution because y'all in this voting thing doesn't seem to be working that great for you. Maybe we need to put some guardrails in here. But this is the entire idea of the Trump project. Trump very much is just a vessel. He is somebody that everyone can be mad at or can love. He's the public face of it. He is no more in charge of what's going on in the government than Shaq is with the general selling insurance or selling big chicken.
Wait a minute. Would you say that
he's the mascot?
Would you stop? Both of you stop. Because look, you understand the way the world works from intelligence. Keith McHenry, and you understand it we understand intelligence and the civil rights movement, all that. We all understand it from these perspectives, from a bottom up and top down perspective, and around and around. Would you please explain that one person does not run the presidency, that people choose a person to do their bidding? Please, Robert and Keith. Robert, first you.
If you ever want to find out whether or not the president is personally in charge of the country, last year, the president got fired in June. Literally, they just fired Joe Biden. Mm-hmm. Who, if you get fired, that means you have a boss. So yes, there's somebody who outranks the president and can simply say, like, all right, old man, you go ahead and go in the back. You just go ahead and lay down. We got this. So the president himself is an idea. There's a reason that we call it the administration. It is a concept. It is a branding exercise. The person who sits in the White House, if you actually think that one human being understands the Treasury and understands the military and understands healthcare and understands intelligence and understands the environment, no. You get a couple briefings, you look through it, and then the people who are the technocrats in that situation make the permanent decision. We had this idea called Chevron doctrine or Chevron deference that the Supreme Court recently struck down, which was that administrative agencies, which are supposed to be apolitical and which had lifetime employees, people who actually were experts in their field for 20, 30, 40 years, where they could make these determinations. And then we will follow the agency, follow the agency's regulations, because we will give deference to them because they knew what they were talking about. The president himself can basically put forward broad agenda items, and then he's a salesman after that. And that's when you go on the whistle stop tour. That's when you travel the country. If you thought that Obama was sitting at his laptop or a typewriter late at night typing up the Affordable Care Act, that's not how it works. He was given the Affordable Care Act by the people who wrote it and then told to go out here and sell it to the American people best you can. That is what the role of the presidency is. What you're voting for is the people around him, the bureaucracy that he's going to put in place, the values of his administration, the values of America, what the goals that we're going to set forth over the next several years are. So the president himself is very much not much different than Ronald McDonald when it comes to how your hamburger comes out.
Yeah, and also it's very useful for the people that are managing. Like Robert is saying, who fired Joe Biden, and why? If Joe Biden was all powerful, why did he let himself get fired? Right? Because it's using and this is something that I when I was starting Food Not Bombs with my friends, we looked at like how they personalized Martin Luther King, right? And they would say, okay, he's the bad guy. And the civil rights movement, all the millions of people that were like working with him and building the civil rights movement, they could demonize King and then make him bad, or Noriega, or Saddam Hussein, and at the same point they can make them the great person like Donald Trump, or whatever. So I think that was one of the problems of the No Kings movement, was personalized. It was like too much. Donald Trump, orange guy, bad. He's doing everything. And it needs to be more sophisticated than that. It needs to be like, no, he represents a power system, and they're imposing their agenda on us. And we need to be opposed to that system and not be so focused on on Trump, because he was perfect for the people. What astounded me when he ran the first time, you would have CNN and these other TV stations run his entire speeches and rallies uninterrupted, donating billions of dollars to the Trump campaign. And so why was that going on? Who was running that? What was the point of that? To have like hour-long ads, basically, that were supposed to be news. But they weren't doing that for other candidates, and they don't do that for other candidates. So there's something bigger going on, and we need to get away from these personality things. Because one of the reasons that I am definitely not a personality of Food Not Bombs is we saw what they did to King, and if we were going to build a social movement, which we've worked on for 45 years, they could say I was having sex with a donkey, and they got video of it, and then no one wants to do Food Not Bombs because who wants to be in a group that has its leader who is portrayed as a person having sex with a donkey, right? So, it just makes it too easy. So it can be both ways. It can be valuable look at Trump was in The Apprentice. He was the perfect person for this job. But who are the people that have put Trump into power, and what are they intending Trump to do? And I think the fact that Trump says one thing one day, one thing another day, another thing, that it's always back and forth, that's part of the plan. That's part of the strategy. It's like Operation Chaos. But we really have to look at, it was even hard to say what his values were. He used to be a Democrat and right? And but he had no values. He's a blank slate that they could superimpose whatever their agenda was on. And part of the agenda appears to be maximum chaos, so that there will be ultimately this, we need, Hitler's people that around Hitler, they did a similar thing. And major chaos. And now, we need somebody to come in and save us, because it's very similar. Weimar Republic, inflation, people with wheelbarrows of cash, all those things. We're kind of doing that again. And then it would be like the people behind Trump will go, Trump needs to do martial law or whatever it is to superimpose wipe the slate clean, and then you have your new constitutional convention. You have your new economic system that's digitally based, or whatever their idea is, and they just put that on, that becomes what is going to happen. So we really just need to be as communities more aware and not so like, Orange Man bad. Because for instance, on the first No Kings event, there was 3 days before Israel launched an unprovoked attack against Iran, and then, but could have been look at we're against Trump's wars, we're against his economic policies, and articulate it that way. But
they didn't touch that.
no, all they had was the Orange Man bad, and it was and here you have like millions of people on the streets. They could be protesting for something beyond just we don't like Trump. But that was never articulated in their media campaigns. It was never in their promotion. People, very rarely was somebody on the stage that spoke out against the genocide or spoke out against the wars.
Yeah, and but Keith, do you think that was purposeful?
I
mean, people
do.
study movements. Just help me, because any of these issues that are the third rails that are electrifying American politics right now and global politics. But let's stick with the domestic. They didn't touch those issues. They didn't touch Medicare for all. They didn't touch Gaza. I mean, they didn't touch, though. They just talked about Trump. Was that purposeful, Keith?
I believe so. I wrote a Substack. I've been writing about Indivisible since 2017 because to me, what it's in one of my more recent Substacks, what was called Control Opposition. So the people that the foundations that funded, for instance, the NGOs that were used as the basis of the coup in Ukraine were the same ones that were funding the No Kings and Indivisible. And so I think they have a direct connection to economic interests in these wars or in not having universal health care, these kinds of things. So they weren't going to put millions of dollars into these No King rallies or hands-off NATO rallies because it would be and then have it be a threat to their interests. So basically what I feel happened, and I think this happens frequently, is they set up the opposition movement against Trump, knowing that people will be completely freaked out about what Trump's doing. But as long as they could control the message and the agenda, then there would never be a threat to the people in power. Because in a certain sense, the people that are funding and backing financially the Trump administration and what they're doing have shared interest in perpetuating these wars, perpetuating private health care, perpetuating essentially the same agenda. And I think that's is a huge mistake if we don't take that into account. And the same people that, for instance, that funded the No Kings marches and so on, are also currently funding and behind the Gen Z events that are happening on November 15th in across Mexico, and they're the same people that funded the Gen Z protests in Nepal, and then put in U.S. connected puppets into power there, and they're destabilizing Indonesia and the Philippines. So, in a certain weird sense, the No Kings thing was another version of it was the U.S. version of a color revolution, but the purpose being to make sure the people in power are protected, that behind the scenes, the people that are behind Trump, the people that had Biden step down, they're protecting their interests. And one of the ways they're doing it is they're obviously, if there was a grassroots movement against Trump, they would also be against Trump's wars. It would be against Trump's economic policies. But that was that millions and millions of dollars. Just the Open Society Foundation alone put, like, I believe, $24 million into the most recent wave of No Kings and hands off protests, because they do not want to lose control of the situation, and they want to be both the opposition and the people in power at the same time. It's quite frustrating that happened and that people fell for it. You know, there should be millions of people on the streets demanding that the indivisible share our agenda, but they're not doing it. And I actually ended up boycotting all the No Kings because the people in my town, Santa Cruz, are the people that are rounding up, sweeping the homeless camps every day. They're the ones that are criminalizing the undocumented in our city. They're the ones that are on this massive luxury condo building campaign. So they're the ones that are pushing the individual in our town, but they do not show they are really just destroying our community, and so why support them if their agenda is the opposite of the agenda of the actual activist community and real progressives in Santa Cruz County. And I like I said, I attended. Fortunately, in Mexico, the people see through this and are starting to push back against this Gen Z color revolution that's being forced on them by mostly U.S. NGOs and foundations. So, yeah, I was writing about this when
You wrote
individuals.
about the missed opportunities. You did.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
did.
And yeah, you can see a whole series of my Substack articles on this, and you know, on Keith McHenry, I think it's called Anarchist Cook dot something. I don't even know how Substack works, but I'm old. I'm a boomer, but I somehow figured it out.
Well, you know,
So,
let me ask you this before you all both go. I mean, where do we go from here? Because what happens if what should Democrats do, Robert? You've been in the legislative space. What do you think they should do now?
What I want them to do, most importantly, particularly while we are on shutdown, go out and talk to human beings. Go meet people. Don't not just in town halls, not just in kind of these controlled areas, not just the political class, not just the activist class, not even just the voting class of people. Go meet human beings who wherever they are at, and ask them, learn from them, talk to them. You know, just put on a T-shirt. Don't even have any congressional midnight show undercover bosses. Go undercover as just a normal person and hear what people are actually talking about. Hear how they feel, and then be able to articulate that in the halls of power. Because the biggest issue that we have is this mismatch between what is going on in the actual community, in the actual streets, and the discussions that are happening in the halls of Congress. But one of my biggest fights going back and forth every day almost is looking at the messaging coming out of the Democratic Party and trying to translate that into something that a human being can understand. Because when they send out an email saying our top line messaging for the day is going to be the oligarchs and the kleptocrats are working together to deprive us from universal health care. We must fight back in order to stop the. No one talks like that. No one understands that. You have to match the moment. You have to match the energy. You have to be out there articulating what the people are actually feeling. And then, as my professor Johnny Wilson said when I was in undergrad, you have to translate the OR to the OR. You have to translate the original language to the ordinary language. You need to be able to explain to people what exactly the continuing resolution is. You need to get to them where they're not having to come find you. You need to be able to explain to them that even if we reopen the government right now, this is what happens next. You have to explain to people that this is part of a long-term goal, a long-term MAGA project. Project 2025 was written in 2022, and we had 3 years to prepare for it, and we did it. Well, this plan for the Convention of the States has been going on for over a decade. They've got 19 states lined up already. They have another 5 that are primed, and then they only need about 10 more after that. We need to be out there pushing this right now. We have to explain that these data centers, this AI, you really think they're giving you free technology for you to rewrite emails and make pretty pictures? If you need proof, and remember 10 years ago when they rolled out the predictive typing on your emails, you're like, oh, wow, it actually auto completes what I'm saying. They're just generating data to find out how you talk and how you communicate, and that was feeding into large language models a decade ago. Remember when those apps came out where you could take a picture and scan your face and they put dog ears on it, or it could make you look old, it could make you look young, it can make you look like a woman, it can see, like, oh, what would you and this person look like if you had a child? And now those AI images coming out that can perfectly reproduce your face. We all simply fed into this massive algorithm over the course of a decade, and now we're seeing what's coming out of it. Do you think all that just stopped now, or have they just simply moved to the next phase and released the next bit to us? The type of computing power that used to take a Hollywood studio to produce, you can do on your cell phone in about 3 minutes now and make a cinematic scene. I've done it all the time. And so we need to realize that if we're not being kept up to date, if we're not on the cutting edge of these battles, we will be left behind. And once you're left behind, it's almost impossible to catch back up. So the people in the halls of power who have this information, who understand these things, I don't care if you have to stand on the street corner with a bullhorn for 5 days a week. Get the information out there and let people know what to prepare for and what the fight is ahead.
And to me, when Hillary called Trump supporters a basket of deplorables, that was a sign, and not just only about Hillary. It's about the political class and who's giving them money, who's wanting to dine in. They need to, the people in power or in the halls of Congress need to start seeing everyone as people with dignity and agency and value. And I noticed when I was serving food in front of City Hall in San Francisco for years and years, the mayor would come in, and the people after lunch and the people with him were always the top executives of the largest corporations in San Francisco. And he could have been hanging out with us and talking to the people that were living on the streets, or he could be been visiting, but his time was taken up. One thing I noticed was his time was taken up by the people that were at the heads of Bank of America, Chevron, and these large transnational corporations who at that time had headquarters in San Francisco. He had no time for like the average citizens of San Francisco. And even the very first mayor that was arresting us had been a social worker, and there's no way that he was, once he got into power, his time was taken up, and he was manipulated the whole time by the police department, for example, arresting through not bombs, which then became his crisis that he had to deal with because he had to claim that he was in charge of the city of San Francisco. So it's a matter of we got to, I don't know if these people could have a change of consciousness and then start, being in Congress or something, looking at the people that they're supposedly ruling as people. That may not be possible. So this could be a really, really, this is that fundamental problem, is that the technocrats don't see us as people, and they don't think people are capable of making decisions. So they're giving it over to these algorithms, to this, to what Robert's saying. Why are they building these massive data centers? It's to control us, and it's to wage war. And it's that's a lot of what the Ukrainian war is about, is collecting data on the defenses of the Russian military and feeding into Starlink and into Palantir's data processing and the AI to figure out how they can ultimately topple the Russian government and seize their assets, just like they did with, say, Yugoslavia, or just like they tried to, this is like a pattern that we can see. And we really need to really put the human spirit and humanity into how we organize our communities and our society, because we're not seeing it locally in Santa Cruz, California, and we're not seeing it nationally. We're not seeing it in the state of California. We have, Newsom had his, his executive order against encampments, and we saw that $24 billion disappeared in homeless services, and some of it was discovered to be in offshore bank accounts where they were allegedly building affordable housing, and instead, that by the time the housing was built, it was market rate housing. But the people that, we just went through an election in Santa Cruz where they're supposed to be making this affordable workplace housing, but from what they've done before in Santa Cruz, by the time it's built, it will be market rate, and we will have, voted for essentially more of the same. We've got to come up with a different way to address these things. And so I think it's going to end up having to be human to human community, activities where we work together, unfortunately, to try to, basically build our local community where we know each other, where we trust each other, and then where we focus on what's important. And for instance, like water, food, housing, electricity, culture, music, and community love, where we're taking care of one another, and we're seeing what is important. But it's really a big task to turn around the aircraft carrier of the United States in a direction where these technocrats that have seized power, and have really behind the scenes always had power, are going to actually capitulate and suddenly have a heart and suddenly think, well, the thing to do is to really, do whatever is best for everybody, because that's really the world we want to live in. Apparently, these people don't feel that way. That's why they're building bunkers everywhere. That's why they're threatening nuclear war. That's why they are just intentionally destroying the economy, and because they think that they're number one, they're the top dogs, they know what's best for everybody, and we're just the useless eaters. And we've really got to change that. We need to come together somehow and figure out a system, because right now there's really no white papers that are going on what we're going to do to replace this current economic and political system in a way that's humane, and the way, because apparently we're surplus population. And that's what, back to your earlier statement about medical assistance and dying, and then the new, efforts that are happening in the United States. Like for Fox TV people, like Brian, whatever his name was, on Fox and Friends, to suggest there should be involuntary euthanasia of the homeless, then involuntary euthanasia of what next group of Americans? And there's been lots of, even Larry Finks and these people have talked about, that there's an optimum number of people on Earth and things like that. And when you got a Laden that's supposedly running our financial systems behind the scenes, and which supposedly was provided the information that, that Obama had to follow. And why did he have to follow that? Was he really in power like Biden was in power? We don't, there's something. We really have to think outside the box in this much, much larger way. And I really appreciate what Robert's been saying. It's like very insightful as to how the political system is organized right now, and how that's being taken advantage of to bring about whatever this agenda is that the technocrats are techno-feudalists, as people have been calling it. They're, techno-fascist. I mean, and I think even the people that we see, like Larry Finks and Peter Thiel and so on, they're the face of something even much more horrendous, which may have direct links to things like British royalty, global royalty, maybe, things like that. Banking interests. You can't say the Rothschilds or you're anti-Semitic, but the Rothschilds have been right out in front talking about what their plans are, so it's a big challenge. But again, I go back to the fact that there is this human spirit that will somehow dodge a lot of it, navigate around it, maybe build, maybe we're going to be like the monks that survived through the Dark Ages and keep that human spirit like alive after whatever these technocrats are proposing is implemented. and that there will be this time where humanity will come together, where we've got to really do what we have to focus on. What's important. That's our relationships. That's the basic necessity. We all need water, food. We all need love. We all need these things, and that's not part of the agenda of the people that are trying to force this agenda onto the world right now.
Robert Patillo, attorney Robert Patillo, and Keith McHenry, Food Not Bombs. It has been my profound pleasure to have had you here today. Um, Robert said, you two brothers are on point. It's the truth. Well, because, as I talked to you, I said, I want to talk about what's really going on. And I laugh about the tinfoil hats because, we've been accused of that, Robert and Keith and Dwight, may he rest in peace. And yet, Dwight McKee, Dr. D used to say, well, in life, you can count on two things, conspiracies and acts of God. And I said, okay, here we are. And the thing is that we have to be vigilant. We have to be aware. If you want to be a subject, let somebody else handle it. If you want to be a citizen, well, we must step up to the plate. And so just think about that. Consider pushing for what we need, not just what we want. Don't get the crumbs. You don't deserve that. We need Medicare for all, period. Full stop. That's it. Medical care, and your health is a right. It is not a privilege. We're the ones who are getting the government that we feel that we deserve. Now we're going to have to make some decisions, and do not have another march where they're not registering people to vote. And do not buy into this single person that you need to hate. Number one, it's spiritually unsound. Just let that go. Donald Trump has been a Democrat. He's been a reform candidate, a reform party. That was Ross Perot. He's been an advocate of that philosophy. He's transactional. Let that go. Now it's about what you want. Go past the people who are in office and you get in there yourself. That's why I'm so glad to see these young people running for office. Because you know what? Dare I say it, Robert Patillo and Keith McHenry, they helped me to keep hope alive. What did Mom Donnie say? Hope is alive. I said, I think I've heard that somewhere before. He said, our time is now. I said, I think I heard that somewhere before when Reverend said 40 years ago, our time has come. It is here. It is here. So let's make this work, everybody. I'm sending you so much love today, and I hope that you enjoyed this conversation. I'm glad that we were able to go, and I'm so glad that these gentlemen, I called them just before we came on there. I said, I've got an idea. I want to get Keith McHenry and Robert Patillo together today. And what a blessing you all have been. What a blessing, what a blessing. Thank you, everybody. Get into Keith McHenry's Substack. And Robert Patillo, how can we get in touch with you?
Follow me on all social media at Robert Patillo. We just crossed 20,000 on Facebook, 15,000 on TikTok. We are building it back out. I've finally decided to pull myself into the digital age. I'm going to do like everyone else and actually start making more digital content. So make sure you tune in, follow, like, subscribe, whatever the young people say, do all those things.
Yeah, and do that here, and everybody. Pass this show along. As I look up, and after a month or so, we've had more than 1.5 million, 2 million people who've viewed this. So pass it along, please, everybody, and help me with the algorithm. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Like and share, And hey, subscribe to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. I'm following Robert's example. He's been trying to help yank me into the digital age. I'm trying. I'm going to try. Sending you all so much love, everybody. I am Santita Jackson, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota.